They told the old man that nothing good ever came from those forgotten tracks, and now he understands why. A broke veteran in a red and black flannel bought a $1 abandoned train in the Wyoming mountains, just hoping for a place to survive the winter. But the moment his loyal German shepherd started scratching at the floorboards, they uncovered a hidden compartment. Inside it lay evidence buried for 40 years, proof of a deadly cover-up that powerful men would do anything to keep silent. What they found wouldn't just change his life. It would shake an entire corporation and rewrite the history of a town that tried to forget. Before we jump in, tell us where you're watching from. Drop your city, state, or country in the comments. It's always incredible to see how far these veteran and dog stories travel. Cold rain slashed through Spokane like needles flung by an angry sky. Henry Walker stood beneath the weak shelter of a flickering gas station awning, his breath rising in shaky fog. His red and black buffalo-plaid flannel coat, thick frayed at the cuffs and missing 2 buttons, was all that stood between his aging bones and the kind of winter cold that liked to take its time killing a man. At 63, Henry still carried a tall frame once hardened by military life, but now bent at the shoulders, as though every year since he left the army had stacked its own burden upon him. His beard, wiry and silver, clung to wind-chapped skin. A jagged scar above his right brow, the souvenir of a convoy ambush decades ago, twitched whenever thunder cracked overhead. Beside him pressed Kaiser, his loyal German shepherd, 5 years old, and built like a muscular shadow stitched together from black and tan fur. Rain drenched the dog's coat and flattened his pointed ears, yet his amber eyes remained sharp, studying the road, the storm, and especially the trembling in Henry's hands. Kaiser had been trained to recognize stress, the sudden shallowness of breath, the glazed stare that war veterans often tried to swallow whole. The storm didn't frighten Henry. It reminded him. And remembering was worse. Lightning split open the sky. Henry flinched, not outwardly, just in the split-second tightening of his jaw. Thunder to him was nothing but the echo of mortars, the sound of dust exploding into screams. His mind flicked back to desert nights, where he'd clung to the earth and prayed the next blast wouldn't find him. His mobile home, the last roof he owned, was gone now, towed away by a pair of men wearing reflective vests and expressions too practiced to be remorseful. They hadn't even waited for dawn. They simply arrived, shoved foreclosure papers into his hands, and before Henry could argue that he just needed one more week, just one, they hauled his life off behind a tow truck. Kaiser had snarled at them. Henry hadn't. Because deep down he believed the supervisor when he said, "It's over." Now all that remained was a battered duffel bag at Henry's feet, soaked clothes clinging to an aging frame, and Kaiser breathing, steadily grounding him, when panic clawed at the edges of his composure. Then his phone rang. The unfamiliar number blinked through the cracked screen. For a moment Henry debated letting it ring into nothingness. Who would be calling? No bank owed him kindness. No friend remained who would dare to pity him. Still he answered, "Henry Walker." A short pause. Then the voice of a man who sounded older than even Henry, felt calm and practiced every word chosen deliberately. "Mr. Walker, this is Daniel Hargrove. I'm an attorney calling from Casper, Wyoming." Henry stiffened. Despite the warmth of the flannel, a chill sliced down his spine. Daniel continued, "I'm reaching out regarding the estate of your late father." Father, a word Henry had not spoken aloud in 50 years. Samuel Walker had been a flicker of a memory, more silhouette than man, an oil-smudged uniform in an old photograph. A laugh Henry once knew, but could no longer recall without force. His mother had always spoken of Samuel like a ghost that deserved no summoning. "He's gone," she said. "Gone, and that's the end of it." Henry swallowed the rain, adding weight to his silence. "There must be a mistake," he muttered. "My father's been dead a long time." Daniel replied without hesitation, "Yes, But his instructions were unusual. They were not to be acted upon until this year. Wind rushed across the empty road, rattling the metal sign overhead. Kaiser pressed closer, sensing a shift inside Henry, a crack opening in a long-sealed place. "What instructions?" Henry asked, voice gravelly. "He left you a property." Henry blinked away raindrops that stung his eyes. "What kind of property?" The lawyer exhaled, papers rustling faintly through the phone. "Coordinates. No formal address. Somewhere near the mountains outside Casper. And it's valued at exactly $1. A humorless scoff escaped Henry's throat. $1 sounds about right. He had nothing. Now he had less than nothing, a joke of an inheritance from a dead man. Mr. Walker, Daniel continued softly, "Your father insisted on one more detail when drafting this legal instruction. He said, and I'm quoting, 'When Henry goes there, he must not go alone.' He specifically said, 'Take his dog.'" Henry froze. Kaiser lifted his head, eyes locked to his owner's expression. Thunder rolled again. This time Henry didn't flinch. He simply stared at Kaiser, the only companion who had never left, never doubted, never taken anything from him except the chance to survive loneliness. "You're sure?" Henry whispered. "Absolutely." It seemed important to him. The call ended with a soft click, leaving the veteran alone with the storm, the cold, and the ghost of a father who suddenly wanted his son to find something worth protecting, worth dying for, perhaps. Henry felt his pulse steady, his thoughts sharpened. Not hope exactly, but momentum, a direction he hadn't had in years. He knelt beside Kaiser and took the dog's face gently between his hands. Rain dripped from his beard onto Kaiser's muzzle. "Well, boy," he murmured, "looks like there's something waiting for us in Wyoming." Kaiser nudged Henry's chin, a quiet affirmation. Together, always together. Henry stood, slung the duffel over his shoulder, and stepped out from under the awning, letting the storm greet him fully. The cold bit deep, but felt less like punishment now, more like a warning that the road ahead wouldn't be kind. He didn't know what waited in those mountains. He didn't know if the man who left him this inheritance deserved forgiveness or rage or nothing at all. But Kaiser trotted ahead, glancing back each time lightning illuminated the wet pavement, making sure Henry was still following. And the veteran who had spent so many years walking without purpose finally moved with one. They vanished into the rain, heading toward a legacy worth only $1 and a truth worth far more. The climb into the Wyoming highlands brought wind that carried a bite sharp enough to chew through flannel and bone. Henry Walker drove in silence, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel of his rusting pickup as Kaiser lay curled on the passenger seat, occasionally nudging Henry's elbow whenever the old man's breathing hitched. The desert had left him with a habit. When the world went too quiet, danger usually waited just ahead. Snow clung to the road like gray-white ash, and the bare branches above rattled in the wind like a regiment lost and shivering in the dark. 3 hours out from civilization, Henry slowed to a stop. The GPS had long given up trying to find a signal, and now he relied solely on the coordinates scribbled on a crumpled piece of paper. Kaiser sat up straight, ears pivoting forward, as if he already sensed the direction fate wanted them to walk. The truck's engine ticked as it cooled. Nothing else moved except snowflakes spiraling lazily through the cold. Henry hoisted his duffel bag, adjusted the red and black buffalo plaid flannel wrapped tight around him, and let Kaiser lead them up a narrow path carved loosely through the pines. The forest seemed older here, the pines thicker, leaning inward, needles whispering conspiracies only the wind could understand. Kaiser sniffed the air pause, pressing deep into the snowtail, stiff with focus. They slipped through a narrow break between two towering boulders, and Henry stopped dead in his tracks. A single forgotten stretch of railroad track lay ahead, rusted and warped like a scar from another lifetime. Snow buried most of the rails, leaving only jagged edges to hint at the line's original purpose. And at the far end of that clearing stood 3 abandoned train cars, towering and silent. Once painted a deep navy blue, time had bleached them into a lifeless, sickly gray. Ropes of moss hung from their windows, and vines wrapped the wheels so tightly that the forest itself seemed intent on never letting them leave again. Henry's breath fogged in front of him. Kaiser lowered into a cautious stance, hackles raised, nose twitching toward the largest car, the one with its sliding door cracked open as though someone had recently pried it loose. For a moment, Henry felt something unfamiliar, the sense that he had been expected. Inside the first car, the air tasted like metal and dust. Faint light slanted through broken panels, catching on stacked wooden crates that sagged under years of neglect. The floorboards protested beneath Henry's boots, groaning like they resented being disturbed. Kaiser stepped ahead, cautious but determined paws silent despite the debris. Then clang. A metal canister rolled out of the shadows, wobbling to a stop at Kaiser's feet. The dog snarled. Henry's heart lurched as his eyes snapped to the darkest corner where the light refused to go. Then he noticed something etched into the steel wall at chest height, letters jagged and desperate. "Don't trust the man in the pines." His pulse stuttered. The air thickened with a sense of trespass. A voice cut through from behind him, calm, deep, and carrying the weary authority of someone who had seen too many winters. "Wouldn't go much farther if I were you. These old cars have a mind of their own. Doors like to close when a man least expects it." Henry whirled around. A tall figure stepped into the doorway. Elias Moore, he would later introduce himself as. Roughly in his 70s, but built with the lingering strength of a life spent outdoors. His beard was snow-white and unkempt, and deep lines carved his face into a map of decades spent wrestling with mountains and isolation. Dark green wool coat patched at the elbows, eyes sharp as a hawk's in daylight, shimmering like flint under moonlight. In one hand, he leaned lightly on a gnarled wooden staff carved and polished from years of use. Henry kept one hand near his belt, old instinct. Kaiser remained perfectly still, tail low, ears locked on the newcomer. "Who are you?" Henry asked, voice low. "Name's Elias," the old man replied without flinching. "Elias Moore. I keep watch over this place. Someone has to." He didn't blink, didn't smile. He simply watched Henry in silence long enough for the veteran to understand this man had been waiting. Elias's gaze flicked to Henry's flannel coat, then to Kaiser. "You're Samuel's boy," he said, not asked. The certainty in his voice struck Henry harder than the cold. Henry stiffened. His father's name had grown foreign in his ears. "You knew him?" Elias nodded once. "A long time ago. Good man. Stubborn, though. Could never let go of the truth." Henry's throat tightened. Memories he never properly owned flickered across his mind, hazy figures in uniform. The faint smell of engine oil, his mother's silence when he asked too many questions. "My father never spoke of this place," Henry muttered. "That's because this place," Elias tapped the train wall with his staff, "is the reason he never came home." A long silence followed, broken only by a shiver of wind pressing through the cracked car. Elias motioned with his chin. "Storm's comin'. Not the kind you want to meet out here. I've got a cabin a ways north. You can stay the night. We'll talk after you've warmed up." Henry didn't move. Trust was currency he hadn't carried in years. As if sensing the hesitation, Elias crouched slowly, deliberately, and extended his hand toward Kaiser. The dog watched him rigid. Then Kaiser sniffed his hand once and gave a small chuff, not friendly, but acknowledging. Henry exhaled tension, easing slightly. Kaiser didn't trust just anyone, especially strangers who emerged from dark corners of trains. "All right," Henry said finally. "But you explain everything." Elias straightened with a grunt. "One step at a time, son. First we get out of this cold." As they left the train car, Kaiser paused at the doorway, giving the shadows one last suspicious glare before following. Snow began to fall again, slow but heavy flakes clinging to fur and flannel. Elias led them along a forest trail that wound between towering pines' branches, bending under the weight of winter. Henry noticed the way the old man tapped his staff against certain rocks, certain roots, knowing every inch of this land, like it was a living thing that could betray him if he misstepped. "How long have you lived out here?" Henry asked. "Long enough to see the mountains take more than they give," Elias replied. There was no poetry in his voice, just truth worn down by time. Eventually, a cabin emerged from behind a thick stand of trees. Modest but sturdy dark timber walls, a stone chimney pushing out a thin ribbon of smoke. A rocking chair sat on the porch, moving slightly, though no wind touched it. A lantern flickered in the window, casting a warm glow that looked impossibly inviting after a night surrounded by metal ghosts and snow-bitten rails. Inside, the heat wrapped around Henry like a forgotten memory. Maps covered one-wall rail lines, mining sites, red strings, connecting points in ways that told a story only Elias understood. A cast-iron pot simmered on the stove, filling the room with the smell of herbs and something wild from the forest. Henry dropped his duffel to the floor, slowly unwinding the flannel coat from his stiff arms. Kaiser shook off snow, then circled once before settling at Henry's feet, still alert, but content for now to let warmth soften his tension. Elias lowered himself into a wooden chair, rubbing his hands together before speaking. "Your father didn't leave you that train because it was worthless," he said. "He left it because there are still people who want what's inside it." Henry's heart pounded harder at the implication. "What's inside it?" he asked. Elias stared at the fire eyes reflecting flames like embers of a memory. "Evidence," he murmured, "of something Iron Crest Mining buried, something they've been willing to kill to keep silent." Henry leaned forward. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. "You're saying my father died because of this?" Elias nodded slowly, the kind of nod that carried decades of guilt. "He tried to expose them. I tried to help. Failed him once. I won't fail his son." Lightning cracked outside, the windows rattled. Kaiser's head shot up, ears pricked. But Elias did not flinch. He looked straight at Henry, voice heavy with truth. "Your father wasn't running from danger when he died. He was running toward the truth." And now Henry understood this snowy forest, that abandoned train. They were not an inheritance. They were a final mission. A mission he and Kaiser were now already a part of. The storm arrived like a beast, unchained its claws, scratching across the rooftop of Elias Moore's cabin. The windows rattled and snow pattered against the glass in frantic bursts. Inside, Henry Walker sat close to the fire, the warmth licking at his frozen fingers as he held a piece of paper that weighed more than any weapon he'd ever carried. The letter-aged edges browned, the handwriting shaky but unmistakably deliberate, was signed Samuel Walker, his father's name, the man Henry had buried in memory long before he ever buried him in truth. Kaiser lay pressed against Henry's leg, the thick fur of his German shepherd coat still cold from the walk back. The firelight gleamed off the dog's amber eyes, eyes full of alertness and trust. Henry absently stroked Kaiser's head as he read the letter again, his gaze stumbling at certain lines, his breath catching against confessions written decades too late. "If you are reading this, son, I failed to come home to you. I was not lost. I was silenced, and they will try to do the same to you." Henry's heart clenched, anger, sorrow, grief he thought long buried. His father hadn't abandoned him. He had been fighting for him, fighting for the truth. Across the room, Elias tended a kettle over the stove. Despite his age, his movements were steady, careful. His rugged frame, tall and slightly stooped, spoke of a man who had endured winters harsher than this one. His beard, white as frost, caught droplets of melted snow dripping from his hat. Deep creases dug into his skin from years spent squinting into mountain winds, and his steel-gray eyes revealed a lifetime of watching danger stir in shadows. He glanced toward Henry. Samuel wanted someone he trusted to finish what he started. Your coming here wasn't an accident. Henry set the letter down. Why didn't you contact me? Why wait all these years? Elias sighed, sitting heavily into his chair. I tried. Your mother refused every message. Said you needed a normal life. A safe life. She believed staying quiet would keep you alive. His gaze dropped to the maps covering the wall, railways, mining routes, supply lines. People like Mallory. They make sure fear travels faster than truth. Henry recognized the name. Chase Mallory, CEO of Iron Ridge Mining. Legacy billionaire. A man who knew how to polish a smile sharper than any blade. The type who never saw consequences, only inconveniences he could bury under money or bodies. What exactly did my father find? Henry asked. Elias leaned his staff against the chair and stared into the fire. A chemical. A byproduct from Iron Ridge's extraction sites. Toxic. They spilled it on tribal land, polluted rivers, poisoned families. Your father had proof. His voice darkened. They couldn't let that get out. Henry pictured his father Samuel in military uniform, tall and broad-shouldered, like his son would one day become, carrying himself with strength that came not from rank, but conviction. A man who refused to look away. The kettle whistled. Elias poured the water into 2 chipped mugs. Truth is stronger than steel, he muttered, but steel kills faster. Henry wrapped his hands around the warm mug, but didn't drink. His gaze flicked to Kaiser, who lifted his head and growled low at the cabin door. A knock sounded, one single cold tap. The door creaked open before Elias could move toward it. A man stepped inside without asking permission. He removed his black leather gloves slowly, too slowly, as if savoring the tension his presence created. Chase Mallory. His appearance was as polished as the corporate world demanded, hair slicked neatly back, salt and pepper at the temples in a way that suggested power rather than age. He wore a tailored wool coat, the color of midnight, no snow on its shoulders. Someone had driven him most of the way here. His black shoes gleamed untouched by mud or struggle. A thin smile curved his lips, but his eyes, icy blue and soulless, held no kindness. Kaiser erupted into a snarl, hackles bristling. Mallory paused mid-step, his smirk tightening. Control your animal, Mr. Walker. I came to talk, not bleed. Henry stood, placing a calming hand on Kaiser's back, but his glare didn't soften. We don't have anything to say to you, Henry said. Mallory ignored that. He removed a packet from inside his coat, a thick envelope, and placed it on Elias's table. Consider this a friendly offer, a generous one. He tapped the envelope. Walk away, both of you. Return what you found in that train. Let the past stay buried. His voice lowered to a chilling whisper. It's better that way. Henry laughed, a sound without humor. You think I'm here for a payoff? Mallory leaned forward, his cologne sharp and artificial, a scent that did not belong in a cabin built from honesty and survival. I think you don't understand what you've walked into. His gaze flicked down to Kaiser. And I think you and your dog enjoy breathing far too much. Elias gripped his staff muscles tense. Henry stepped between Mallory and Kaiser. The room shrank around them, danger swirling thicker than the snow outside. Mallory straightened, retrieving his gloves. Last chance, Mr. Walker. You're in a story that doesn't end well for heroes. Or pets. With a soft click of his tongue, he stepped out into the storm and vanished into the white. The cabin's warmth evaporated. Elias locked the door. He'll be back. Not with offers, with orders. That night, wind howled against the walls. Henry lay inside the train's middle car with Kaiser tucked against him. Elias had insisted they sleep there, claiming it was easier to defend an iron box than a wooden cabin. But the storm outside had turned savage, shaking the train with every gust. Henry's eyelids were heavy when Kaiser suddenly jolted upright, ears pricked, teeth bared. The dog dug frantically at the floor nails, screeching against metal. Henry grabbed a lantern, following Kaiser's urgency. Beneath a loose steel plate lay a hidden compartment, and inside it, a military-grade lockbox. Henry's breath caught, Samuel's secrets waiting in the dark. He opened the box. Inside were documents, lists of contaminated sites, names of dead miners and sick children, photographs of barrels being buried in unmarked trenches, signatures linking everything to Iron Ridge mining. And another letter, addressed to my son. Tears blurred Henry's sight as he unfolded it. His father's final plea: don't trust Mallory. Don't trust the Pine Watchers. Trust the dog. Kaiser growled again, deep and urgent. Then footsteps, many of them, snow crushing beneath boots. Shouts outside. He's in there. No one leaves alive. The train door was kicked open. Armed silhouettes surged in flashlights, cutting jagged beams through the dark. Henry grabbed the documents, shoving them into his duffel. Kaiser barked fiercely, teeth flashing as the first intruder lunged. Elias's voice bellowed from outside Henry. Out the back, follow the ravine. Henry dropped through the secret hatch beneath the train car, snow blasting into his face. Kaiser leapt after him. They scrambled through a narrow fissure between rocks, guided only by Kaiser's instincts and Elias's shouted directions. The cold night swallowed them whole. Bullets ricocheted off stone. Flashlights thrashed behind them like angry specters. Henry clutched the duffel tighter as they ran. Evidence. Truth. Father. No longer echoes of a dead man, but a mission for the living. Somewhere behind them, the cabin door crashed open. Elias's roar of defiance rang out alone against wolves. Henry didn't look back. He couldn't. Not yet. Tonight's survival was more important than grief, but the promise had already formed inside him. He would finish what his father died trying to expose, and no one would silence Kaiser. Not while Henry still lived to fight. The underground tunnel swallowed sound like a tomb hungry for memories. Henry Walker moved cautiously, each breath visible in the freezing air. Beside him, Kaiser padded forward with deliberate precision, his paws crunching over loose gravel and rust flakes that once belonged to railroad tracks long since abandoned. The walls around them dripped icy water. Every droplet echoed like a countdown. Henry's heart felt too loud, both a warning and a reminder he was still alive. The documents in his duffel bag weighed heavier than any weapon. They were truth, dangerous, explosive truth, and he knew powerful men would do anything to keep it buried. Kaiser stopped abruptly, his body tensing. His ears snapped upright, and he turned toward a narrow fissure in the wall. Henry followed the dog's focus, pulling out his flashlight. The beam sliced through dust-heavy air and revealed a metal panel embedded into the rock. Stenciled letters barely readable beneath rust. Project Highland. Restricted personnel only. Henry's pulse quickened. His father's warnings reverberated in his skull. Trust the dog. Kaiser pawed at the panel claws, scraping against iron. Henry found a recessed lever and with a grunt forced it down. The metal door groaned open, cold air gushing out as if the bunker exhaled the secrets it had hoarded for nearly half a century. Inside lay what once was a command center, now a mausoleum of technology lost to time. Panels of buttons, a dusty radio console with shattered glass, old antenna cables snaking across the ceiling like dead vines. A long steel table stood crooked, but on the far wall, barely touched by decay, hung a polished plaque engraved with a name, Highland Line Command Node Installation, by S. Walker. Henry felt his breath shatter. His father had built this place. He stepped closer. fingertips brushing the engraving. Imagining Samuel's hands tightening these bolts, his eyes scanning these systems, hope and fear fighting in them both. Kaiser leapt onto a control panel, paws landing near a large toggle switch. The dog looked to Henry, barking once sharp, demanding action. Henry's lips curved into a faint, proud smile. "All right, soldier. Let's finish the mission." He inserted the files into the scanner port. The machine groaned awake like an old soldier pushed back into battle. Lights flickered one by one, then steadied. A screen sputtered to life, its brittle plastic warping under the glow of text, connecting. Transmitting data to Department of Defense Environmental Safety Board, Associated Press Direct Network. Henry almost laughed when the bar began to fill. All his father had tried to expose, all the deaths, all the crimes finally rising to the surface. Kaiser stood guard, his body tense. The dog knew something was coming. Henry felt it too, pressure in the air, like a storm behind stone. Then a voice from the entrance of the bunker cracked the silence. "Turn it off. Now." Henry recognized the tone, the arrogance, the entitlement wrapped in rage. Chase Mallory. He stood framed in the tunnel entrance, breath-hard suit disheveled from the chase. His black coat, once immaculate, now carried snow and dirt stains, an insult he clearly resented. In his hand was a handgun fitted with a suppressor. "Samuel should have stayed quiet," Mallory snarled. "You should have stayed homeless." Henry stepped in front of the console, spreading his arms as if he could shield the truth with his own bones. "You killed him." "He killed himself," Mallory corrected coldly, "by digging where he shouldn't. Like father, like son." Kaiser growled, body lowering into a defensive stance. The upload bar flashed 95%. Mallory's hand shook impatience or fear. "You have no idea what billions in losses feel like, Mr. Walker. But you're about to." The gun rose. Kaiser lunged. The shot fired first. The bullet slammed into Kaiser's shoulder blood, bursting against the concrete like a cruel winter blossom. Henry's scream tore raw from his chest. Kaiser yelped, collapsed paws, scrambling helplessly against the floor. Something ancient ignited in Henry, then the soldier buried deep beneath guilt, poverty, and years of walking without destiny. He charged Mallory. The two men collided, slamming into machinery. Mallory grunted, swinging wildly, but Henry, powered by rage and love, fought dirty. Elbow to the throat, knee to the ribs. Mallory dropped the gun. It skittered across the floor. Henry grabbed him by the coat, slammed him against the metal support beam. Mallory's head struck hard, his manicured composure shattering. On the screen, the upload hit 100%. A loud electronic chime rang through the bunker, like the bell tolling for the man Mallory had been. Mallory roared, reaching for Henry's throat. "Nothing you do will change." Henry's punch cut off the sentence. Mallory crumpled, moaning, defeated but alive. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police, federal agents, emergency response crews, all alerted by the transmission Samuel designed decades before. Boots pounded overhead. Voices echoed down the corridor. Henry stumbled to Kaiser. The dog whimpered, still alive but breath shallow. Henry pressed his forehead to Kaiser's, tears falling freely. "Stay with me, please." His lips brushed Kaiser's ear. "You saved me too many times to quit now." Agents flooded in, guns raised, then lowered upon identifying Henry as the victim, not the threat. Medics sprinted toward Kaiser, lifting him onto a stretcher. Henry grabbed the dog's paw as they hoisted him up. Blood stained his flannel red and black like a soldier's final uniform. As they pushed Kaiser toward the exit, Henry followed, even though his legs trembled, even though his heart wanted to shatter and lie beside the truth his father fought for. Kaiser's eyes fluttered open, barely long enough to meet Henry's, and trust him once again. The snow outside howled like the voices of all the ghosts finally freed from silence. And somewhere behind them, Mallory's empire began to collapse. But Henry only saw the stretcher being loaded, only heard Kaiser's faint breathing. The battle was won. But the war for the heart he refused to lose had only begun. The wind outside the veterinary hospital in Jackson, Wyoming, howled like a restless animal, sweeping snow across empty parking lots and piling white along the sidewalks. Inside, the heat hummed steadily, but Henry Walker still felt cold in his bones. He sat hunched on a stiff plastic chair, staring at the double doors swinging shut behind the surgical team, who had carried Kaiser beyond reach. His hands, scarred by war, hardened by years of labor, trembled when he clasped them together. The red and black buffalo plaid flannel clung to him like a second skin damp from melted snow and stained with his dog's blood. His thoughts spun tight and cruel. He had survived ambushes, explosions, and the hollowness of coming home to a country that forgot him. But here, in this sterile place full of beeping machines and antiseptic smells, he feared defeat more than he ever had on the battlefield. A door clicked open. A woman in dark green scrubs stepped out. Dr. Emily Carter, mid-40s, tall and broad-shouldered like someone who had spent her life working with large animals, pulled down her mask. Her strawberry blonde hair was tied back in a knot that had begun to loosen, a testament to hours of intense work. Her eyes, emerald and steady, held exhaustion, but also kindness. She exhaled a fog of breath escaping her lips as though the weight of bad news hovered close. Henry's heart seized. "He's a fighter," she said softly, and Henry's vision blurred before the relief even fully formed. She explained that the bullet had passed through muscle but missed vital organs. Kaiser would stay under observation for a few days, but he would recover. Her voice carried the calm authority of someone who spent her life saving the creatures others couldn't bear to lose. Henry sank back into his chair, his shoulders shaking, tears finally carving paths down his weather-beaten cheeks. Kaiser's survival felt like a miracle he did not think he deserved. Over the next weeks, winter crawled slowly over Wyoming. But for Henry, time sprinted. The leaked documents Samuel Walker had preserved in steel and secrecy ignited every news network. Anchors spoke his father's name with reverence. Elias Moore was mourned as a hero. Chase Mallory, once a polished CEO, now appeared in handcuffs, his carefully crafted reputation collapsing under the weight of criminal charges. It was surreal watching a corrupt empire fall on hospital room televisions, while Kaiser dozed beside him wrapped in blankets and trust. During recovery, Henry spent long hours speaking to Kaiser quietly, fingers gently running over the rough fur around the healing wound. The German shepherd, 5 years old, and always alert, carried his strength in his muscular frame and his intelligence in his warm amber eyes. Even sedated, his ears would twitch whenever Henry's breath hitched with emotion, as though reminding the old veteran that he wasn't alone, not anymore. Once Kaiser was cleared to leave, their first destination wasn't the motel Henry rented, nor the authorities seeking more interviews. It was the silent stretch of forested track outside Casper where their journey began. Snow blanketed the rails like a burial shroud that refused to stay still. Crews in bright jackets and reflective helmets now worked the site. They nodded respectfully when Henry passed some, whispering his name like a legend born overnight. Where 3 forgotten train cars once stood like ghosts, restoration crews had fortified them into something new, something living. The jagged metal edges were gone, replaced by wood-paneled exteriors and warm roofs. Henry had used the settlement money and donations from veteran organizations to transform the rail relics into a winter refuge for soldiers lost in peacetime. Inside, the smallest car held bunks lined with quilts sewn by local volunteers. The middle car housed a shared kitchen and a long table carved with the signatures of its guests. The last car nearest the tree line had wide windows for watching snowfall, a soft sofa shelves of books, some about healing, others simply about life. Kaiser patrolled them all daily, tail wagging, becoming a guardian of recovery for men and women whose invisible wounds matched Henry's own. And slowly, Henry found something he thought the war had taken forever: purpose. Each veteran who arrived carried a piece of the struggle Henry knew too well, nightmares that clung like shadows, guilt sharper than any shrapnel, a question no one could answer. Why did I survive? Henry's answer was Kaiser, and now this place. One late afternoon, amber sunlight slipped through winter clouds and turned the snow into glowing sugar fields. Henry finished tightening a new brass plaque onto the center car. It read, "Valor Rail Haven, in honor of Samuel Walker and Elias Moore, guardians of truth." Kaiser nosed his hand, nudging him gently, as if approving the work. Henry chuckled, brushing fingers behind the dog's ear. "You think we finally did it, boy?" Kaiser responded with a soft woof, then lay sprawled at his feet, tail sweeping little arcs into powdery snow. The weight of years settled gently instead of crushing. But stories tied to railroads are stubborn. They always leave tracks that continue farther than the eye can see. Henry walked toward the rear car to check insulation along the roofline. His fingers grazed cold metal and stopped. A panel beneath his grip shifted ever so slightly, as though waiting for him. Kaiser stood instantly, ears high. Henry pried the panel open. Inside, buried in a narrow recess, was a steel box, the same military-grade design, the same kind his father hid from death and corporations. For a moment, Henry simply stared, breath snagged in his throat. His heart began to pound, that familiar soldier's drumbeat. Kaiser edged closer, his stare unwavering. His healed shoulder bore only a thin, pale line, now a scar like a medal. Henry let out a shaky laugh. "Looks like Dad wasn't finished talking to us." He rested a weathered hand on the dog's head. Snowflakes drifted around them like soft applause. "Ready for one more mission, partner?" Kaiser pressed his forehead into Henry's leg, his way of saying always. The sun dipped behind the ridge, turning the sky violet and silver. The Haven lights flickered on, glowing warm against the cold. Between rails and pines, between past and promise, Henry and his loyal dog stood poised at the edge of another secret. And the winter night, silent but watchful, seemed to whisper that justice may have begun. But the last page of the truth was still sealed in steel. At the end of every long road, after every storm and every night we think we won't survive, there is always room for a miracle. Sometimes it comes as a second chance, sometimes as a quiet moment of clarity, and sometimes it arrives in the shape of a loyal dog who refuses to let us fall. Whatever form it takes, it is never random. It is grace. It is God reminding us that we are seen, protected, and guided, even when we walk through the coldest seasons of our lives. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment, tell us where you're watching from, and remember to subscribe for more stories of courage, faith, and redemption. May God bless you, your family, and everyone who watches. May His light lead you through every winter toward a miracle of your own.